Since 1994, Convoy of Hope has been bringing help and hope to those who are impoverished and suffering throughout the world. In doing so, we've served more than 70 million people in more than 100 nations.
We have the power in our hands to transform the lives of thousands and thousands of families across the United States and around the world. And when people move from hopelessness to hope, there is absolutely no limit to what can be accomplished in their lives.
Our impact is on level with bigger organizations. Thanks to our strategic corporate partners and a dynamic worldwide network, we're able to feed nearly 150,000 children and their families in 10 nations and rush emergency food and supplies to some of the most far-flung places on Earth. We also hold community outreach events, train women to start businesses, and help farmers in developing nations increase their yields. Some have referred to us as one of the world's best-kept secrets. That depends on your definition of a secret.
Hey guys, it's Nday here.
Hi, I'm Drew Brees.
My brothers and I have worked with Convoy of Hope for a while now.
I'm playing for Convoy of Hope. They're an amazing organization. They feed a child in need for $120 for an entire year, which is unbelievable.
Convoy of Hope has done so much for these kids and for these families, these farmers.
The international relief organization Convoy of Hope started rolling its trucks to prepare for a response.
A Missouri-based charity called Convoy of Hope is here handing out coats, blankets, food, water, real help for real victims.
And since Thursday at midnight, you have raised, brace yourselves, $250,000.
Major corporations, celebrities, and influencers from both the private and public sectors have strategically aligned with Convoy of Hope because they believe, like we do, that no child, mother, or father should go hungry or have to suffer under the crushing weight of poverty.
So much help from Convoy of Hope.
Not the first time we've seen them in action.
Yeah.
They are there when you need them.
Man, let's give them a hand. Well, good morning. I'm Happy Leman. I'm one of the senior pastors and would like to just say welcome, and we're glad you're here. If you're online, we're glad you're watching us today. We're just thrilled to present a very special morning, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. We have with us Dave Donaldson, one of the co-founders of the Convoy of Hope. Convoy, if you're a guest, is our partner. You know, you'll see up there on that screen, it says here, near, and far away. Our faraway ministries really revolve around two things: missions in China, Mexico, and Taiwan, and partnering with Convoy of Hope, a large humanitarian organization, works around the world and throughout the USA. Just really, really a neat group. Now, our speaker this morning is one of the founders, Dave Donaldson. His brother was Hal and was on the video. Dave's written a book called Relentless, and I think you would enjoy this. There's books out there in the Commons if you're interested. Worked in Washington, D.C. for 10 years. Got some interesting stories. Married, lives in Springfield, Missouri, has 4 kids. Just, you know, amazing story that he and his family about putting this Convoy of Hope together. Started in 1994. He'll say more about that. But as good as the story is, the best part is I love him as a brother. And I've been with him on a cruise. I've been with him at meetings. I've been with him a lot of places. And he's the type of guy who is really, really got the love of God written all over him. Not only does he talk about love, he talks about power as well. And that fits with a vineyard context. And so if I didn't know better, I'd say he's a vineyard member, and I've tried to recruit him a couple of times, but he's not moving out of Springfield as of now. Now, there's a little brochure. Some of you got these. We ran out. We'll have more. If you need more information on Convoy, go to convoyofhope.org, and that will be perfect because they work with us in 3 areas: agriculture enhancement, women's empowerment, and disaster relief. So one other guy who will be speaking, and don't clap yet, but Brian, Dave, you can come on up. And Brian McLees is our vineyard representative in this organization. He's from a vineyard in Fort Collins, Colorado. great friend of mine. Those of you that are older, catch this. His mother, 88 years old, is the oldest known graduate of our School of Kingdom Ministry. Now, amen. Dave hasn't yet taken School of Kingdom Ministry and is in a lot of trouble until he gets through it, but I'm going to give him temporary forgiveness. God gives you permanent forgiveness. I only give temporary. There's a big difference. But at any rate, he'll be sharing some facts and details, so he'll be up toward the end of the message. So Dave, come on up, and this is all yours, so take over.
Great. Thank you, Hap. Good morning. Well, we're so grateful that we had what you called a God Stop a year ago in Alaska. And I just want to say something about your pastor. The word encouragement means to put courage in. And you and Di have certainly done that for us and for our team. And I can't think of anybody, and I mean this, I can't think of anybody over the last year that has been a greater source of encouragement than both of you. And so thanks so much. And we're just so inspired by Vineyard and your long history of serving the poor, both here, near, and far away. Yesterday was a wonderful day. We went out to the outreach that Clay was directing, although he was unsuccessful in getting Hap into the dunking booth, which would have been fun to see. Also, we took the tour of your Hope Center, and Dina and her team are just doing an amazing job. So congratulations on that. Yes. There's an African proverb which says, if you want to run fast, then run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. We saw that at the Olympics with the Kenyans and Ethiopians. And for this partnership, we're going to run far. And God is already using us in miraculous ways to help the needy in America and around the globe, and you're going to hear about that this morning. You know, Hap, I'll tell you, I already feel grafted into this family. And I'm so sorry my wife could not join us. She would have loved to have been here. She is caring for my mom, and we've been married for 31 years. And she is from a place where few missionaries would dare to go, North Dakota. So I married a farmer's daughter. As you mentioned, Hap, we have 4 kids, 3 daughters, 1 in med school. So yes, I'm broke. And but we also have a young daughter named Barbara, who we adopted out of foster care when she was 16 years of age. And when I first met her, my wife and I first met her, she was like this. She had been so abused and neglected, but you would never know that now. She has repeatedly made the dean's list at Evangel University, and she is a trophy of God's miracle-working power. And Focus on the Family is now using her story for their Wait No More events, so we're just so proud of her. Our son, he graduated last May, and he's now living in our basement. You can relate. And to add to the pure delight, he brought his band. So we now have his entire band living in the basement. So when we talk out in the foyer, and if you hear me saying, what? It's because I've lost hearing. Okay, and I asked, if I could be part of the band. I thought being a former rock and roller, they would give me a shot, but they said something about the need for rhythm. And but they said, hey, you can be our manager. And I'm realizing that I should be called funder, not manager. But it's a lot of fun, a lot of fun. Before we talk about one day to change the world, I want to take a moment to talk about the one day that changed the world. 9/11. At the time, we were living minutes from the Pentagon, and I'll never forget that morning. I was driving alongside the Pentagon on my way to a meeting in Arlington, Virginia, and then all of a sudden it was boom, and my car was shook. I thought it was a sonic boom from an F-16 above our heads, But as I drove to my meeting, they grabbed me out of the car, ushered me upstairs, and we looked out this big glass window, and all you could see was smoke billowing out of the Pentagon. And then I foolishly got back in the car and tried to get home, and there were so many emergency vehicles I had to pull up onto a shrub. And so I sat there for over an hour with no cell phone coverage as emergency vehicles, one after another, passed by. And needless to say, it was surreal, and perhaps you remember that where you were at on that day. But it was a day where, as Americans, we took an inventory of our lives, and we realigned our values with God's values. Tens of thousands of people flocked to the churches. I talked to one business leader who said his goal in life is no longer to be the richest person in the cemetery. And there are so many stories of people that push the pause button to discover, rediscover what's most important in life. And this morning we're going to do that through One Day to Change the World. Yes, at the end we're going to receive a One Day to Change the World offering. But today is more about an offering. It's about you and I doing just that. It's saying, God, I want to align my life, my family, my business with your values and goals. The scripture we like to use for One Day to Change the World is Leviticus chapter 23, verse 22. You'll see it on the screen. And the Bible is very clear that all of us have a field. And that field comprises our life. It's our time, our talent, and resources. And in both the Old Testament and New Testament, you have this principle. And this principle is that we all have a field. It might be small, it might be big, it doesn't matter. We are to leave the first fruits of our field, our tithe, to the local church. And I love Hap's tithe invitation, that concept. But in addition, we are to leave the corners to help the poor. Again, with our time, abilities, and resources. And I'm standing here today because in 1969, a family that didn't have a big field, didn't have a big bank account, didn't have a big house, shared what they had. I want to put a picture of my family up on the screen. My parents were pastors in Northern California. And there's my siblings, our dog Buffy, cat Billy. But weeks after this photo was taken, they were driving down the freeway, and our parents were hit head-on by a drunk driver. Our dad was killed instantly. Our mother survived, but they literally had to pin her body back together again to survive. And I'll never forget that day when we went to visit her in the hospital, and we stood outside looking through a glass window. And she was so beaten up and broken, we couldn't even recognize her. In fact, my older brother Hal, that you saw in the video, was standing next to me. And when she spoke his name, he collapsed to the ground beside me. So there we stood, the three brothers and then a younger sister, wondering what would happen next. Where would we get food and clothing, and who would take in 4 kids? And amazingly, the people in our community brought us hot meals every single night for nearly 6 months as our mom got on her feet. Compassionate, generous people. In fact, as our mother began to recover, the food was so good we pleaded with them to continue to bring it. My mom has many gifts, but if she were here today, she would confess that cooking was never one of them. I kid you not, she would use the smoke alarm as the timer. We would pray before the meal and afterwards. But these people, they brought us this food every night. The only problem is that we had 4 kids, and for whatever reason, they'd bring us 3 of one thing, like 3 pork chops. But the 2 I had tasted pretty good. Survival of the fittest. But then it was a question, who would take in 4 young kids? And let me tell you, there was not a long line of people waiting. But this family, the Davises, opened up their hearts and their home. And as I mentioned, they didn't have a lot of money. And this is a home that they had, a single wide trailer. And I recall walking up after they invited us into their home, and I was scared, I was nervous. I thought this would just be another stop along the way. Would they really want us and keep us? But as we approached the front door, it swung open, and there Mr. Davis stood. And as we shuffled inside, he gave each of us hugs, and this is what he said. He said, "You are with family, and this is your home." And that 4-letter word that I write about in my book changed our lives, because it meant that the Davises were not only willing to share their space, but they were willing to share our sorrow, our pain, and our anger. If I could speed 40 years forward, because I mentioned our daughter Barbara, after we met her, we invited her into our home, and we peered through the glass as she walked up to our house. And I know she was scared, wondering, would that just be another stop along the way? And I opened the door and I gave her a warm, inviting smile, like Bill Davis had given to me 40 years earlier. And Barbara walked into our house, we gave her hugs, and I whispered this in her ear. I said, "Barbara, you are with family, and this is your home." You see, when we make room for others, when we leave a corner, God just keeps on blessing, doesn't He? And I mean, there's just been so many miracles, and I wish I had time to share with you so many of the miracles that have happened as a result of one day to change the world. I can't help but forget a couple in Sarasota, Florida, and they didn't put their check in the offering. They handed it to me personally, and they said, this amount, this is the same amount we were going to use this week to go to a divorce attorney. But as you spoke, it just dawned on us how we've been serving ourselves, and together we need to serve God and others. And so instead of this going to an attorney, this is going to help the poor. Praise the Lord. You see, the Bible tells us if we will combine both generosity with compassion and faith, He will enlarge our harvest field. The Bible says that He will enlarge the harvest of our righteousness. That word righteousness in Hebrew is tzedakah. It's a word we use for generosity. He will enlarge our capacity to be generous. In the world's economy, if you give 10% as a tithe, you have only 90% left to pay your bills. If you give, let's say, 10% to help the poor, now you only have 80%. But in God's economy, He's saying, trust me, because if I can get it through you, I'll give it to you. That's His promise. And that's what is so exciting about one day to change the world. You know, some of the values that the Davises taught us was a discipline and work ethic. And you're about to see why this is so important with these programs that Convoy of Hope has, because we are taking on this systemic culture of dependency. Like my family is grateful for the welfare system as a safety net, but it was temporary. And so we are working with these families in America and around the world to help lift them, again, from a state of dependency to a state of being used to empower others like you do at the Hope Center. And I want to show you this transformation chart, if you look up on the screen. First of all, we are feeding 150,000 kids every day that are in schools, that are also getting educated. Now, to give you an idea of how many children are dying each week because they lack clean water and nutritious food, it would fill your stadium, Memorial Stadium, 4 times. Think about that. Every week, children, innocent children, dying because they lack clean water and nutritious food. Some say to me, well, we need to just educate these kids. Well, how do you educate them when they're falling from the desk out of weakness? And so nutrition, education, the clean water, it protects these kids from contracting diseases like cholera. But it also has a huge collateral benefit by protecting young women. Because most young women in the world spend their entire life finding water. Now, from here to Memorial Stadium, it's 2 miles. Up and back 4 miles. For a typical young woman in third world countries, just one-way walking to get water is 4 miles. That's their entire life. They're not being educated. They're not being empowered. And so by combining the nutrition with the water filtration systems, we can make sure these kids don't get sick, that they're healthy, that they're strong, they're being educated. But also these young women have a safe passage through life where they're not attacked, they're not raped, they're not being kidnapped. And we can do it. We can do it. I want to conclude with this before Brian comes up to share about the different areas, including the disaster response, the women's empowerment, and agriculture. But I want to put a photo up there of us with the Davises, because when Convoy of Hope passed the 20-year mark, our anniversary, we had a big celebration. And we invited the people that were there with us at the beginning. And it was just an amazing reunion. And during the event, there was this family seated off to the right, and we invited them up as the Davises to honor them. And as they walked up, we're all sobbing, just so grateful for what God had accomplished. And I want you to take a good look at this photo, because look at the face of Bill Davis, the richest man I know. Because as soon as this photo was taken, he turned to me, and this is what he asked. He said, I never knew our love for your family would result in helping so many people. And friends, as we leave the corner of our field and we serve and as we give, we'll never know. We'll never know the people in Louisiana that are being helped right now because of this partnership. We'll never know these children that are getting a nutritious meal and an education. We may never meet the women in Ethiopia, Tanzania, that are part of the women's empowerment, that now have their own jobs. We may never meet all these farmers that are now just incredibly blessing their countries. We may never meet them. We may never know them. They may never know us. But at the end of our life, all that matters is that God knows. God knows. And I believe as a result of what we're doing today, it's bringing a big smile to God's face. God bless you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dave. As Hap mentioned earlier, I'm part of the vineyard. I don't know if I should tell you this, but I've been part of the vineyard since 1982. And I grew up in the church, and there was a moment earlier encouraging you to get involved in small groups. I want to tell you, it wasn't until I got involved in a vineyard small group, you young people, that I met my wife. Just saying. But Dave, thank you so much. There's so many stories where bitterness could have won the day. And for the choices you've made, now 75 million people have been touched by the love of Jesus. And he's a friend I'm really proud of. Sorry. So the things that we want to drill down in are just the practical moments. You know that 3 weeks ago, Convoy of Hope began its response in Baton Rouge. Convoy of Hope was the first national organization in Baton Rouge after the flooding. And since then have multiplied thousands of local volunteers living in Baton Rouge to reach out to their neighbors who are suffering and in a crisis. But you may not understand just the magnitude or the scope of that. But because you guys participated in One Day to Change the World last year, we're able to respond and mobilize those churches, so thank you. 45 truckloads, tractor trailers have been deployed down into that region in these last 3 weeks, distributing over 1.5 million pounds of relief supplies through the local church in conjunction with local disaster management, so that the long game is the church is recognized as a key partner in disaster, and they become the local hero. So thank you. That also means that in those 3 weeks of the strategy where we were doing what the local management asked us to do, we had 75,000 opportunities to touch people with the love of Jesus. And perhaps say, could I pray with you right now? That's what that means. Food, water, cleaning supplies, debris removal. This last weekend, we transitioned now into debris removal, and we'll be there for some time. You know, just at the first of this year, we completed our response to Hurricane Sandy, which began in 2012. I just want you to know that, so it's not a photo opportunity, then we're out. We're going to be there for some time, helping the church reach out to her neighbors. So thank you so much for that. That's also good to know that just in the first half of this year, you've helped us respond to Cyclone Winston in Fiji, the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, tornadoes in places you probably didn't know or heard about in the news, Century, Florida, Platteville, Louisiana. But you probably did hear that we responded to the earthquake in Ecuador, flooding in Sri Lanka, the Nicaraguan earthquake, flooding in Houston, Texas, Rosenberg, Texas, the wildfires in Erskine, California, and flooding in West Virginia. I don't even have all the numbers from the third quarter, so thank you for helping the church be a first responder. You know, that's a crisis situation where suffering is spawned, but there are also areas where there's chronic poverty that Dave alluded to, and the corner of our field touches those too. And I want you to understand a bit of a picture of how food security is crucial around the world and including in America. It's the number one issue for the poor. So we began to dream, how could we do that in a way that lifts people out of dependency, so we're not just giving away free aid that creates dependency? How can we equip impoverished farmers, families, with the skills and tools and seeds to produce a life-sustaining crop? A little over 4 years ago, we were blessed to hire Jason Struble, who is a soil science graduate PhD student from Washington State University, with the thought of having an opportunity to demonstrate hope in every single crop. And he began to put together a strategy that they watched for 3 years and then presented a paper to the American Society for Agronomy that demonstrated this correlation between an implemented agricultural education and a marked increase in farmer yield and also the resiliency of the crop. And just since 2013, beginning with just 30 farmers in Haiti, his team of agronomists and ag technicians in 6 countries have trained, get this, over 4,000 farmers. In 2013, when they began, they contracted with these farmers. You know what? We want you to give a corner of your literal crop, that field, 10% to subsidize and sustain our children's feeding initiatives. And since then, in just 2.5 years, those farmers that we trained initially and some more that as they grew in the numbers of farmers trained have supplied 3 million meals to our children's feeding initiative in Haiti. And that was exponentially exploded by the earthquake that happened in 2010 when we were feeding 10,000 kids in Haiti. Now we're feeding 65,000, thanks in part to this agriculture program. So it's working. The chronic issues that we alluded to in agriculture are also demonstrable and highly observable among women. 1.3 billion people living in severe poverty around the world, and 70% of those are women. And began to have a similar dream years ago about changing the climate regarding compassion and thoughtful economic development for women. We developed 3 prongs in our strategy: women's moms clubs and empowered girls. And this year, Diane, Regina, and Dina, and Tam toured our facilities in Tanzania, so they got to see the moms clubs and the empowered girls programs. I just learned this last week that Dowdy, who led them on their tour in Tanzania, said that there are now 2,000 graduates from empowered girls. In empowered girls, the young girls are taught self-worth, esteem, and how to take a stand against harmful cultural practices and beliefs and gender-based violence. The moms clubs teach nutrition, health, hygiene, literacy, small-scale agriculture, and 11,000 ladies have now been trained in that small-scale agriculture. The participants are given the incentive to come to learn about these things with 1 month's free food, and then these skills that they practice help lead them into learning about a business plan, how to launch a business, how to do accounting, how to save, and pay it forward to a next group of ladies. And that has now increased so that we have been able to launch, get this, over 4,000 businesses with women at the helm. Isn't that wonderful? Thanks to you. That's all right. Thanks to you and friends like you, these ladies have started businesses in retail, livestock management, tailoring, food preparation, accounting, small-scale farming, and they have a 96% success rate in the launch of these businesses that we've now tracked for many years. Their incomes have increased, in some cases, over 245%. That means they're no longer living in the slum on the street, at risk for some of the things that Dave alluded to, which is a remarkable contrast. When we first met these ladies, half of them infected with HIV, the large percentage of them Muslim, have over time, thoughtfully, not in an impulse, began a relationship with Jesus Christ that's transforming. There's a story, sometimes I think it helps when it's personal, of one young woman that we helped in a similar way in the Philippines. Her name's Kate. I'd like you to watch her story. Thanks so much.
Sometimes I go to bed, I have no food in my stomach. If I don't have enough food, I can't concentrate in my studying, and I can't understand what my teacher was saying to me. Thank you, because the food that they give to us will not be wasted.
I'm turning 16 this November. I'm in college. I'm taking up hotel and restaurant services. By God's grace, we have our food now. I'm so grateful, and I will be forever grateful that Convoy of Hope is as a sponsor of our church for me to continue my study, have my meal. Studying hard now for my future, and someday I promise to myself I'm going to help them, help my community here, our community and our church, and I will someday become the sponsor of our church, like you guys. I'm so thankful.
Just a couple of concluding comments. You see put the sign up there on One Day to Change the World. Not that one, the one that started the screen out where it talks about here, near, and far away. You know, from a church point of view, on the far away aspect, our work involves Mexico, China, and Taiwan. But there's an aspect we can't possibly do. It involves even far away in America. For instance, the floods down in Baton Rouge, worse than Katrina, although they aren't getting near the publicity. A vineyard pastor from down in that area called me and said, "Hey, Happy, can you help? We have 70 vineyard families homes completely destroyed." I said, "Yeah, we can help. I'll call my buddies at Convoy. They'll be there." Well, they were ready there before that call ever happened, but it was so nice. I felt completely empowered. It was like, wow, we got boots on the ground right now. They're down there with food, and their first thing is survival, and then they come back to help you restore. They don't just come in for a little while and get the photo op and get out. They commit to staying. I just leaned over and asked him, I said, "Hey, there's just a bad earthquake in Italy. Those of you Italian descended people, there's Convoy of Europe. They got there and started helping." So right on the spot, there's people representing us. We as pastors absolutely love the concept because we can't go. We don't want to come to you every time there's a disaster, but we want to be able to help. And so it ties the best of all worlds together, and we have a real partner. And I just want to say thanks to Convoy, Dave, and Brian for all they did. Let's give them a hand. Thanks again. Amen.